Thanks for the intro. Thanks for the lovely intro. Just by the way, the reason why I'm here is because Josh and I were at business school together. Josh was a year ahead of me, and he invited me to come and speak. So yeah, really glad to be here. I really do understand that you guys have made the sacrifice to be here and listen to me, so I hope that I can provide a lot of value for your time. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about what 22seven is, right? So that'll give you the context behind the stories that I'm going to share. I spoke to a couple of people when I arrived today, and it was good to find a group of people who actually knew what 22seven was, because the first 10 people that I spoke to had no idea. So I'll give you a bit of an intro around what 22seven is, and then we'll go into the stories. So 22seven is a money management app. It helps South Africans transform the relationship that they have with their money by getting them to see all their money in one place, which really then gets you to understand your money in a way that you haven't been able to before, and then use that newfound information to make better financial decisions going forward. And the way that it works is by aggregating financial data from a number of different sources. We used a technique called screen scraping, which some of you may have heard of, where we collect data via asking customers to enter their online credentials for their profiles. It's highly secure. There are 1.5 million accounts that are securely linked to 22seven, and that data is then aggregated and enriched, so categorized and visualized in a way that people have never been able to see their money before. So now you get to see all your spending across all your bank accounts, your credit cards, your investments, your loans, all in one place. And that view is quite unique, because most people, when they think about their money, they compartmentalize it. They think of their credit card as very separate from their bank account, but in actual fact, it's all the same money. And once you have the power to see all your money in one place, and you get these personalized insights, which is another feature available on 22seven, you're encouraged to make smarter decisions and grow your wealth over time. Okay, so that's the context. That's 22seven. I was at 22seven until July this year. I'm now in between roles. I was telling Josh I'm unemployed. I am a father and I am a husband, and that's my role at the moment. But I'm in the process of starting my own fintech. I have plans to explore and enjoy the exploration process from the beginning of October. Okay, so I've got 7 lessons that I wanted to teach you or impart with you today, my lessons, my failures. The first story starts in the beginning of 2020. So we had decided at 22seven that there was this big problem that we needed to solve. Customers were signing up for the service, easy for them to sign up for the service. Growth from an initial standpoint wasn't difficult. People would download the app at a very low cost. But what we found is that at the point they need to enter their credentials, your bank tells you don't share your credentials with third parties, people were getting cold feet, right? So 1 in every 2 people that were signing up for 22seven were not linking their account. So we said, okay, let's provide these users, these customers, with an alternative method, something that's easier, more of a soft landing. When I say easier, easier in the mind, more of a soft landing, giving them the ability to provide their data. Because you should remember, in a personal financial management app, if you don't have the data, the app is useless, right? And so if people don't link accounts or provide financial data, the app is useless. So we decided we were going to launch this feature called statement imports, allowing customers to import their bank statements into 22seven. So you don't have to share your online credentials, you can just import your statements. The first mistake we made was, we did all the right things, right? So let me talk about some of the right things that we did. We did customer validation, prototypes, put it in front of customers. Customers were saying to us, giving us, you never ask customers, we should know this, you never ask customers leading questions, but customers were giving us every indication that they would use the service. We then decided we were going to build this thing on Android and on the web. The first mistake we made was actually deciding to build it on 2 platforms, right? The first lesson that I want you to leave with today is spend time working out the lowest cost experiment you need to validate your hypotheses, right? We didn't need to build it on 2 platforms. We didn't need to build it on Android and web. Our rationale at the time was, hey, we've got developers that are sitting on the Android team who could do this work. We've got a web team that's also waiting for work. Let's give it to them. Android is our most used platform. It will have the biggest impact. But actually, what we needed to validate is, would people use the import statement service, right? They're telling us that, hey, they're giving us the indication that they want to use it, but would they actually use it? When you're running your own company, you'll find that there's so many different voices in the room, right? There are people from marketing and customer support who will scream from the rooftops, how can we have this feature on one platform, but not have it on another? This concept of parity, not having parity across platforms. Let me tell you, in the bigger scheme of things, not having feature parity is not a bad thing at all. What's worse is spending 6 months trying to build something on 2 platforms only to realize after the fact that people are not using this thing. And then having to inform them that you're sunsetting the feature because it's a waste of time, right? And so again, think very clearly and carefully around what is the minimum viable experiment, right? We use the word minimum viable product. What is the lowest cost experiment that will validate the hypothesis that you're actually trying to test? And be explicit. So this is the second one. Be explicit about your hypotheses, right? Make sure you know what you're measuring and before you go to market and how you're going to measure it, right? Because that keeps you honest. Before you build something and you take it out, you've got some aspirations for what this thing will be and how it will perform. If you don't set benchmarks or yardsticks of how you'll measure success before you go live, it's very difficult to keep yourself honest after the fact, right? So really important to be clear about what those things are before you go to market. The next lesson is allow for time to learn and iterate what you've built rather than moving on to the next feature. Once we had built statement import, we went on to the next thing. Oh, let's iterate the budget screen, right? The downside of that is you're not learning, right? If you don't give yourself time once the feature is launched to actually understand how's the feature performing, what do the quantitative metrics tell me, interviewing customers again once the feature is live and in market to understand what worked and didn't work, you're not learning, right? And I'm very sorry to say that 2 years later, that import statement feature is still the same. We did not iterate it, we did not change it, we have not sunsetted it, and it is still heavily, heavily underutilized. So give yourself the time to learn and give yourself the time to iterate rather than moving on to the next feature. Most businesses make the mistake of focusing on a product roadmap. You know, you see a roadmap, a 2-year-long roadmap. Oh, this is what we're going to do for the next 2 years. You've got to shift the mindset from one of output-driven to outcome-driven, right? It's very easy for a product owner or for business to say, I know that we're going to build this particular feature because this particular feature will take this much time to build. That's a lot more predictable than actually knowing what the outcome will be. Knowing the outcome, that's so complex, right? You build something, everybody told us, oh, statement import, yeah, you know, I'm not going to enter my credentials, but I'll import a statement. Very highly likely. Didn't turn out to be the case, right? That's much more complex. Understanding that the outcome is unpredictable and maneuvering, learning from that and maneuvering and changing what you built to allow for the information, that's complex, but that's important. And the reason why it's important to focus on outcomes rather than outputs is you free the team that's actually doing the work to think about how do we achieve the outcome rather than how do we build the next thing? Because they're focusing on how do we improve data collection into 22seven. If it's not statement import, it could be doing something completely different. It could be sunsetting the feature. It could be iterating statement import. But they're free to think about the outcome. The fifth one is that customer outcomes are actually super, super important, right? For a large part of my time at 22seven, we reported metrics like app downloads, active usage, number of people who are linking accounts. And those are all okay metrics, but those are superficial, super, super superficial. The surface, scratching the surface, right? What really matters is your service having the impact that you set out to at the beginning? If you think about 22seven, what's super important for us is, are we helping South Africans become financially stronger? Are we helping them become financially free? And how do you measure that, right? You don't measure that through app downloads, linked accounts, active usage, are they logging in? No, You don't even measure if they're setting budgets. It's not about setting budgets. It's actually, are they growing their net worth? Are they growing their investments? Are they paying down their debt? Are they spending less than they make? And if you look at those metrics tell you that your business is actually doing something meaningful. And that also, if you work backwards from the customer outcome, you start to focus on the really important problems. And oftentimes at 22seven, we would focus on these vanity, superficial metrics and forget about the bigger problem. So think about outcomes, but think about outcomes with the customer lens. The sixth one is related to a different story, right? So right after we built Statement Import, our team jumped onto iterating the budget screen, our third, the primary functionality that 22seven is advertised as. And it was our third iteration of that screen. We launched it on Android. Again, did all the right things. Customer prototypes, customer testing, looked at international best practice, what are other guys doing, interviewed our own customers from previous research, launched it, and it was chaos. Customers were up in arms, oh, this is terrible. How could you do this? This is, it's a lot worse than it was before. Please bring back the old functionality. And our customer support team was feeling the heat. In fact, people in the team were actually saying, why, and this is a statement I hate, why fix it if it's not broke, right? But one of the problems that people don't appreciate is that just because something is running doesn't mean that it's the best thing you have available, right? It's not the best version of that feature, right? In fact, if you look at the data, budgeting, which 22seven is primarily advertised as, is quite highly underutilized versus the other functionality on the app. And so it needed to be iterated, right? At that point, you start to have a witch hunt happening in the company where everybody starts looking for someone to blame. Like, who made this decision? Who decided to make these changes to the budget screen because it's terrible and customers are complaining? And that's when you need to step up as a leader. Because if you don't protect that process, that outcome, you run the risk of creating a team that's afraid of trying new things. You've got to back the people who tried, because if you didn't try, you wouldn't know. If you didn't know, you wouldn't learn and you wouldn't improve. Right? We made some changes to the budget screen. We didn't go back to the old version. We just made the next version even better. But what was so important was protecting the company culture to the extent that we allowed everyone to have the confidence to come back with ideas, to try again. Because the moment you say, oh, it's that person's fault, they made the decision, you've lost it. That's the end of the company culture, and probably the company as a whole. And the last lesson, I know we've got, hope we've still got time for questions, right? The last lesson is avoid incrementalism, right? Avoid incrementalism. It's very easy once you have a product that you've built already to just keep focusing on making it just a little bit better, just trying something a little bit better, and hopefully things will work out. But it's really, really important to not let incrementalism, take over, not let problems come to you, but be intentional about thinking about what is the biggest problem I need to solve right now? What is that problem that if I solve will actually be game-changing for the organization as a whole? In 2019, our dev team was complaining that the software, the code for one of our platforms had become too difficult to work with. Oh, it's so spaghetti-like. It's been worked on by many developers in the last 4 years, and if we try and make changes, it's very difficult, takes a lot of time. And could we get X number of months, turned out to be 2 years, to rebuild the app so that we can work with an easier code base? The problem with that is those 2 years mean that you're not learning anything, because you're rebuilding the app to where it was 2 years prior. What we should have rather said was, actually, you know what, that's not the biggest problem to solve here. We're still trying very hard to find product market fit. We're still trying to find an engagement loop that gets people to keep coming back and engaging with their money. Let's rather focus on that and work through the spaghetti code, because we will learn more in that 2-year period, versus trying to rebuild the platform from scratch. So avoid incrementalism. Those are the 7. They're largely focused on venture, on the value proposition development part of the venture build. So many more lessons that could be here all night, as you can imagine, having listened to me for this long. But really keen to hear your questions and your thoughts, even if they're different. Really keen. Thanks.